Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Elevated Feminine Podcast. You're here with your hosts, Nicole and
Jen,
where we have real conversations with real women. And we're here today with Jess Burke.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here.
Yes. And we're here talking to Jess about her company and her coaching practice called Rize Girl. We're super excited to talk to her, how she's building a safe space for young women to build resilience and gain self-awareness and elevate their lives. She comes with 15 years of experience working with the youth and doing youth mentorship and empowerment programs. And so she's super passionate about helping the next generation of females discover their genius and rise to their fullest potential. So we're so excited to have Jess on our podcast today.
Yes, welcome, Jess.
Thank you so much. This is going to be super fun.
Yay. So why don't you, I kind of gave like a little overview, but I'm sure you can do much better at describing yourself. Why don't you give everybody, all our listeners, a introduction and an idea, like what are you all about at Rize Girl? What's Rize Girl all about?
So yeah, Rize Girl is all about helping the next generation of females rise. So it was really born out of an idea from my own lived experience of really needing more supports at that age. So I work with girls from sort of early high school through university and into young adulthood. And what I find with the sort of self-identified women that I work with is there's so many big transitions during that phase, and they need a little bit of extra support, extra community, and extra skill building at that age so that they can navigate those transitions smoothly and with a sense of who they are. My biggest dream with Rize Girl is that girls can tap into their own unique gifts and bring them to the world sooner. My own personal story is it took me a while, and with a lot of us, it's a wandering path to kind of get there. But I would love for them to be grounded in that sense that they have gifts and to be having a support network to help them share those gifts with the world.
Amazing. Love that so much.
Yeah, I think that's a definite necessary gap to fill. So, because I'm guessing for me, we don't really say high school in the Caribbean. It's first form, second form, secondary, tertiary. So I just want to get a good sense of the age range that you're working with. Is this from, you said high school, is it maybe 13, 14 to maybe 18, 19? Is that the age range just about?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Yeah, so I'm up in Canada, and everyone does it differently. There's middle school, high school.
Yeah.
So traditionally, that would mean sort of grade 8 onward. Although I do work with some of the preteen youth as well. But my sort of sweet spot is that once you've gone through puberty, it's a, challenging transition. There's all the hormones, all the things going on. A lot of girls kind of lose themselves a little bit in that experience and need to find their voices again. And what the statistics all say is that transition through puberty really hormonally affects your confidence. And your confidence just plummets after that experience. And I think that's something as women that we can all relate to. We all go through that like, ugh, who am I in this body anymore phase. And there's all, the teenage angst, and there's all these big feelings that they're experiencing. And so how do you come out of that experience and come back into that confidence? Because what we sometimes see is you have that sort of dip in confidence, and then it takes a long time to build that back. And sometimes it's not until you're like 30s, 40s that you kind of discover yourself again and say, hey, I want to step into my power. And I really think with the right support, girls can start to come into that through high school and really blossom in it in their 20s when they're starting to step out of the world and decide what they want to do with their lives. And it's their first sort of foray into adulthood. So yeah, I do work with a pretty broad range. So I've worked with girls as young as grade 4, 5, 6, doing some workshops, and we'll just do some sort of confidence building around that age. And then I've worked with my older clients are upwards of about 25.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely important because that's when you can find yourself. You're trying to figure out who you are. And start falling in with different crowds. It's like you're trying on different personalities, different ideas to see which one fits, which one feels right. You have no clue. I mean, sometimes I have no idea who I am.
It's so true.
We're not going to talk about my age, but I think it ping pongs, it shifts. With the tide almost, so I can't imagine having been through it, feeling completely lost and unsure as to which path you are supposed to take being pulled in multiple different directions by the friends, your peers, your parents, whomever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to have that one voice, yours, that you can hone in on to help get some clarity and some grounding and some direction. That's a very, very necessary void, if you will, to fill. So thank you so much, Jess, for Rize Girl. This is amazing. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
That's awesome. I love the way that you put that, in that you're always in a process of discovering yourself. And I think that's so true. And with some of this support for, the younger age group, it's like you're on a journey, and this is not going to give you all the answers and a big transformation. The goal is really to set you up with a skill set so that as you're going through those, you feel supported. And like, that's what I love, even with this podcast, is it's just elevating female voices and having women feel supported with whatever stage they're going through. And it's always going to be a meandering path, but we don't want them to feel totally lost or isolated in that experience. And that's really the goal of helping support them along the way.
Awesome. I think that's what's kind of like been missing in like the whole community aspect, where, like now that we're digital and we have bigger cities, we live in bigger communities, we're getting less and less community focused, it feels like, where women would have these group of women and they'd work together from young ages until, like they're becoming mothers themselves, and they'd have that whole support network of fellow female warriors, if you will, helping just guide them through that. And I feel like in our society today, it's lost a little bit. And it kind of lost even in gender roles. How do you see gender roles showing up in your practice with these girls? Like the kind of, I'm not supposed to be strong and loud and all of those, like some of them are subtext, but there is sometimes some people are, oh, you should be nice to that person, or that boy pulled your hair, it means he likes you, kind of thing. Like all that kind of stuff. How do you see that showing up in your practice?
Yeah. And I think actually from what I've seen, it's not subtext still. And that's what we sometimes forget, because we've made so much progress, and it's so awesome to celebrate that progress, but we're still swimming in the waters of the patriarchy. It's all around us. And so there is subconscious messaging going to all of these girls and to ourselves. We can see it in ourselves. The biggest thing I see with the girls I work with is it'll come out in what their inner narratives are saying to them, or what their inner critical voice is saying to them, or what imposter syndrome is coming up for them. And usually that's when they're taking up space and being authentic and really showing up as their full selves. And culturally, we're like, actually, no, we would prefer if you would just be a good girl and be humble and likable. And I've internalized all of that messaging myself. And then later in life, to try to break through those are really ingrained sort of neural pathways of like, I'm liked better when I'm humble. I'm liked better when, and that feels good. And therefore I'm going to keep doing that. But internally, I think on like a soul level, I'm like, I want to be authentic, right? So you get this real disconnect. And that's why I think when we come in sort of in those more formative years, we can help try to redirect some of those pathways. And we can help. I mean, the thing is, the societal messaging will always be there, but if we can encourage them to step into their power, even when it's there, or with awareness that it's there, as opposed to just taking it all in and then allowing that to sort of change the whole trajectory of your life, I think that's where we get into that empowerment. So that would be the vision too, is that there's more awareness. Like I just was running a workshop with girls where we were talking about our inner critical voices, and just starting with awareness at age 15, 16, that you do have a little voice in your head and it's trying to keep you safe. Well, what does safe really look like for you? And can we expand what it means to be safe? But yeah, the gender norms are 100% still there. And we see them in pop culture. We see them in so many different things that it's impossible to not internalize them to some extent.
For sure, especially without that awareness. I like that point on awareness, that because that's kind of what Jen and I are doing with this, right? It's not about us versus them, feminine versus masculine, or anything like that. For us, this whole thing is just about opening up conversations and being genuine, being real, and able to like have those conversations candidly, knowing that we all have these things going on. I mean, Jen, what's your take on that?
No, I definitely think I actually wrote down the word awareness, because that is a key word for me. And I've come to realize the more I teach yoga and the more I have conversations with women and stuff like that, everything is awareness. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful to have it. Once you have it and you can become aware of your habits, your tendencies, all those different things, you can make great shifts and change in your life, different decisions you can make and stuff like that. And yeah, it's definitely not us against anyone else. I mean, we have our own internal battles, as you just mentioned. So we just want to create a space. I don't know, in my yoga training with Rasa Yoga, we stopped saying safe, because as you said, what is safe for someone? So we start to say brave. We say brave space instead, so that you can feel okay with using your voice and expressing yourself and showing up as who you are. So we replace safe with brave. We want, because it does require bravery. It does require courage to be able to share your voice and to even step into your authenticity. We say we want people to be authentic, but do we really want people to be authentic if we can't control what that is? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it does take bravery and courage to step into yourself and own it, when you realize what that is, of course, or who that is.
Right. Well, like the entrepreneurial arena, we're all entrepreneurs here. We're all building our businesses, coaching practice, yoga practice, business strategists. We're all doing our thing and building each other and others up. And it does take, I've been building a business since it's been, I think I counted it now as 11 years. It's more than 10 years now. Which again, we're not going to discuss my age either. But, it does take courage. It's scary to put yourself out there. It's scary to, say, hey, world, here's my work of art from my heart, and take it or leave it, but take it, please take it, or leave it. No, take it, right? There's still that element in that too.
Yeah.
I love that reframe to the brave space. I think that's so beautiful, because the act of being seen, you're right, within that cultural context is an act of bravery, really. Because you're going to have all those internal feelings that are pushing you against that. And so to be able to step into your power despite having those, and that's another thing we like to talk about a lot, is that those feelings are always going to be there. That inner critic's always going to be there. That little feeling of like, ooh, do I want to do this or not? That's always going to be there. And can I practice moving forward, even though I know that's there? And I love too, with yoga, there's so many parallels, is like, how do we practice awareness in our body? Because a lot of this stuff that I'm doing is mindset work and this and that, but there's such a somatic and body-based element to it as well.
Yeah.
Which is why when we talk about, girls going through puberty and losing themselves, they're given a whole fresh body and a whole fresh set of hormones. And it's like, how do you bring them back to their body and feel safe and then brave within their body? So I think it's all interconnected. And if you don't have someone sort of showing you how you might be able to do that, you can figure it out on your own, and you will eventually. But certainly from my experience, there was a lot of pain, pressure, stress, like all these things where I was just really uncomfortable in both my body and in many ways in my mind as well. So I love that reframe of how do I show up bravely in this space, and how can I find support both in my body and with what I've got going on internally, some of the internal work.
Definitely. That's okay. So amazing.
So we're going to take a quick break and come back with Jess from Rize Girl and learn a lot more about how she's empowering and elevating young women of tomorrow.
Today. Welcome back, everyone, to the Elevated Feminine Podcast. We're here with Jess from Rize Girl Coaching, and Jen and I are having this amazing conversation with Jess about elevating the next generation of young women as they're coming into their, well, I don't want to call it womanhood, that sounds weird, but as they're coming
into their own.
As we're getting old. We just had a whole sidebar conversation about calling ourselves old. And we really wanted to get into, Jen and I are super curious, Jess, about how you're building community and what that means for you in your practice, both as a coach and as that support network for these girls, but then also within their communities as well. Like, how are you helping them foster community? We know that's so important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's easy for all of us to look back to when we were either in high school or university. A lot of us, without even realizing it, had some sort of community around us and really relied on that, but may not have like labeled it as community. So that could be, you know, great friendships, or if you're in a new experience or trying out a new hobby or moving to a new city, like you're automatically gaining those sort of social connections, which are so important to allowing you to, you know, feel supported on your journey. So, it really is two-pronged. So you mentioned like internally, how do I as an individual put those little feelers out and start building community sooner, which is what I try to work with the girls. But then also as Rize Girl grows, how do we create a sense of community as an organization so that Rize Girls all feel like they're connected to other Rize Girls? So those are both pieces of it. I think one of my first posts when I launched my account on Instagram, which was of course like totally overwhelming to put myself out there and like record a reel and post it on Instagram, or it felt like it at the time, was about how I had felt so supported in my launch of the business because I had, without even really knowing it, built community over the years. So I had worked in corporate initially, but I'd always been involved with coaching through sports or volunteering and all these other pieces. So I had a little network around me that then supported me as I tried something new. And my whole vision was, okay, as these girls, if we want them to show up authentically and want them to step into their power, we need to be a community around them so that when they do that, it's a little bit less scary. Because when you're doing it entirely on your own, if I had recorded that reel and posted it and gotten crickets, I could have still done it. Like I could have still stepped into that power, but it would not have felt as good, right? Like feeling celebrated as you go through it is really helpful to sort of validate your experience and keep building that momentum. So, I mean, through our programming, I always have a group container because I myself have done group coaching, and I just love the creation of a safe space of people going through similar experiences. And so there's so much you learn just from people sharing their stories, as I'm sure you guys will find on this podcast. Just sharing stories in and of itself is powerful and empowering. So we always have a group container that we like to use. And then I actually have been finding lately that people want me to come into their community groups. So it could be a sports organization or something that's already formed, and there's already some like-mindedness there. And they want to engage in activities that help build and cement that community that's already there. So we all like the same thing. How do we connect more as humans within that experience? So some of it is facilitating workshops that allow for that like deeper level of connection. But within my group program, I always work on a community piece. So you look at do a little audit. Who's in my community? Who do I already have? Who could I reach out to? Who do I admire and look up to that I sort of can actually look at what pieces of them I find interesting and why I admire those qualities, and how do I grow relationships with people like that? And so it's giving them that little foundation and the little push, because it can be a bit uncomfortable to say, hey, I want to start building my own community.
That's amazing. Yeah. If you haven't already realized, listeners, friends, Jen and I definitely love the community aspect and love the reaching out aspect. So hence why we reached out to Jess to come and talk to us about community, because everything you said it just resonates so much with what Jen and I are trying to do, what we're both all about in the yoga communities as yoga teachers, as business women. It's all these different communities. You're so right. Just help, like give that little boost and support, because let's face it. Yeah. Okay. We'd like to be all these enlightened beings that don't need external validation, but then why would we be in interaction with one another? Point, how boring, right? Mm-hmm. I love being celebrated. I don't need it, but gosh darn it, it sure feels good.
Yeah, it does. It does. It feels really good to be celebrated. And it is good to pat yourself on the back, but it's nice when somebody acknowledges what you're doing and how you're doing it. It feels good. It's motivating. It's encouraging. Yeah. And I wrote down the word workshops because I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and find out if you can give us an example of what one of these workshops would look like what would it entail? that you're offering within your community, and then by extension, the other communities that you're going into, because you mentioned that someone has invited you in. So I'm really, really curious. Please share with us.
Totally. I did one last week actually it was just an empowered identity building workshop. And so what we were looking at with that group, it was a group of grade 10, 11, 12 students who hadn't spent much time digging into that question of who am I? Because it's a bit of an overwhelming question. And again, like I always like to say with youth, like you're not supposed to have this figured out yet. But let's peel back a couple layers. Yeah. When you're 40, 50, 60, like there's not an end point to identity. Yeah. But can we start to just pull back a few layers? What are some pieces of yourself that you're proud of? And what are some strengths that you think you have? And that's that whole piece of sharing your gifts with the world. If you don't know, even are starting to know what those gifts are, or you don't really believe that you have gifts, we're not going to bring those gifts into the world. So something around that where we're peeling back some layers of identity. And I love identity work because it helps us see ourselves as whole humans outside of whatever achievements we're chasing after or whatever we've got going on. I'm always call myself a recovering overachiever, but I spent so long trying to get the gold star to help me feel like I had a sense of identity. And I was just attaching my identity to all the wrong things. And sometimes in life, we attach our identity to the roles that we play or the job that we have, and we don't dig deeper into who am I really as a person that makes me completely unique from all these other people around me. And some of that work starts early of just like, oh, yeah, I didn't even really think about the fact that when I show up in a room, people say they like this about me. Oh, that's a natural strength and gift that I have. And how do I keep leaning into that? So that would be an example of one around identity work.
Oh, I love that. That sounds really good. I want to come to one of your workshops.
Oh yeah. They actually can be I always, when I do them, I give the worksheet out to like the teacher or the coach or whoever has asked me to come in, and they love doing the work too, because there's no age limit on this work. It's more, we try to make it a little bit more accessible for that age group. So sometimes I'll say like, what's your favorite food? And that can still be some identity work, is just spending some time on like, what do I love? What gives me positive energy? And just tracking those things over time, following those breadcrumbs.
No, I think that's really important, because sorry, Nicole, I'll be quick, because if I don't, I might forget. Because as I mentioned before, things change, things shift. I think we're always evolving, and you might have been one thing one particular time because that was a requirement for whatever it was you were doing or whatever it was you were going through. But that might change over time. I mean, or you might get an allergy and maybe pizza is not your favorite dish anymore because you're allergic to whatever, you know what I mean? So I really do think that ever so often, we should all probably do that identity check in and see, wait a minute, has that needle moved to the left, to the right? Is it the same? Have I changed? Because circumstances push us into changing sometimes, whether we want to or not. So I really love that. That's really powerful. Definitely. What were you going to say, Nick?
I was literally pretty much the same thing, but on a different route. I was just marveling at the fact that all of the stuff that you're doing, Jess, I think is so important, because even as you grow into other decades, we'll just say as the decades move on, we begin to, I'm in my fourth career change now. And I mean, I'm still entrepreneur, and I count entrepreneur as one, but if I count entrepreneur as individual businesses, that number goes up into 7. Like, this is my 4th business venture, or 3rd. I can't even keep track anymore. But like, the whole idea of being able to make those decisions, sometimes they're scary, because we're also, at least our generation, like, what were we calling it? The millennials, right? The millennials are like the 80s babies.
Yeah.
And our generation is just kind of after the generations before us, who were still kind of, you get one job, you get the white picket fence, you stay in that job, you get the retirement, and, all of that stuff. I kind of feel like we're teasing away at that. And there's lots of people who are starting to, change careers and exploring, even with the more freedom with sexual orientation and gender identification, and all of that stuff is so important, because that's part of how you step into your power. It's not necessarily what defines you. For some people it might be, but it doesn't have to be. But it definitely is part and parcel when you know how you feel about those subjects, it definitely affects and impacts how you show up.
Totally. Yeah. I love that point of like that there's been a shift because, and part of what I attribute it to is, internet and just being able to see people doing it differently. And similarly, hearing stories of people doing it differently, because you're like, oh, that's cool. Like you were able to do that. Maybe I can do that too. A lot of our sort of pop culture, movies, whatever, still kind of shows that little linear white picket path. And so some of the girls that I work with still have internalized this like very linear belief of what success looks like. But they also on TikTok, on Instagram, on whatever, are seeing completely different, just total disruptors who are doing it differently. And what I loved when I heard in yours, Nicole, is that it's people expressing themselves. So expressing the full version of themselves. So they are seeing that those different options of doing it. And I think that inspires them to try doing it a little differently.
Yeah. And I think what's great about a container like yours is it helps, because for me, I definitely am the first person in my family that I can think of, in my immediate family anyways, I have a big family, but my immediate family that is really, really focused on doing it different. Like doing it differently. I've moved countries now 3 times, 4 different countries in my 4th.
Every time you do it, is it a little bit easier? Like, do you find that as, no?
I mean,
interesting.
I adapt quicker, more faster. And I kind of like, okay, I'm going to get it, but it still terrifies the crap out of me every single time. Every move, every new business venture, every time I show up on Instagram, it still is like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And like, even before this podcast, I'm like, you see me in the background doing my air pumping movements just to like jazz myself up. But it's just, you get better at facing it. Right. And that comes with practice. And gosh, darn it. If I would have had a program like yours, just that helped me get into that sooner, it would have saved me at least a decade. At least.
Yeah. And you know what I always grapple with is like, maybe it wouldn't have saved you a decade. Like, I don't know. This is with some of those girls. Like I always say, we're just planting seeds, but I think it would have allowed you to say like, yeah, I feel confident in expressing myself. Like, I don't know if this is the right way to express myself and I still need to do trial and error and it's still a journey and all that stuff. But like, just, I think when we keep going back to that concept of showing your whole self, or using your voice, stepping into your power, it's like, hopefully it would give you the foundation so that you can do that without questioning yourself quite as much the whole time.
Sure. Because it's just trial and error, right? And, I've gone through several versions of myself, like numerous, countless. I have every year in high school from age like at least 9 until 18, I had a different hairstyle, different hair color. I'm smiling with my teeth showing. And then one year I didn't like my smile. So I had closed mouth, like even just that stuff alone, way overthinking. Weird poofy bangs, 80s baby, right? I got the whole. So.
Why am I not surprised that you're doing it differently, Nicole? And I saw every single one of those. I saw every one of the identities you just identified with the different hair colors, everything. I saw them all the different versions of Nicole. I saw them all, and they're all still there, just showing up in a slightly different way. And I think that's beautiful. For me, it was. I grew up in a very, I wouldn't say super strict, but very. Very keep to yourself, somewhat sheltered. I didn't go out and party till the age that you were deemed okay, old enough to go out and party and stuff like that. And, I had a group of friends who were partying from the time they were like maybe 13, 14 and doing all the things. So I felt very out of place a lot of the time. So I was extremely cautious. And I've come to realize, even though I've taken some risks and done some things as I've gotten older and wiser and stuff like that, there's still that deep desire to be cautious and be skeptical about everything. But I did discover parts of myself that I never, ever thought I could ever be. And I'm looking at myself like, oh, is that you, Jen? Oh, I like her, but let's put a pin in her for a moment because she could get you in some trouble. But let's just bring her out when we need a little bit of zazz, a little bit of pizzazz and push and stuff like that. But I do think having a support system, someone that you trust, that is going to be objective, that's going to strip back and give it to you bare bones and guide you, when you are asking those questions, because a lot of times people don't think you really want the answer, but sometimes you really do need or want that answer. And I think having that voice, even though it may not make any difference per se in that particular moment in time, I'm sure one of those girls or a few of those girls that you're working with, Jess, maybe 5-10 years from now, will go back and stop and say, you know what? I remember when Jess asked me this. And I'm really grateful she asked me that question, because here I am now, potentially even helping someone else, you know, in the same way. So I love that you're doing this work, and it will continue when they pass through your program. Is it like a specific timeline that this program that you do with the girls lasts for? Or is it just like a workshop? I mean, do they almost like graduate, if you will? I'm using air quotes, people. You can't see it, but I'm using air quotes, lots of air quotes. Do they like graduate or something, if you will, and move on? Or how does it, I mean,
yeah, you could. I'm playing around with actually doing some sort of more of a membership program, which is, again, would be super more low touch community focused. My group program is 2 months long. So it is really just a moment in time. Because what I'm trying to do with those, a lot of them is like, give them some foundational skills and then say, go out and try, right? Like go out and try using some of these skills. And then if you still need support down the road, you know, I'm there. But it's the goal is not to, you know, be coaching them forever. It's to give them an injection of some of the stuff that might energize them and then let them go out and try it on their own. So yeah, but I love the idea of having some sort of even like a free membership where people can just build that community. I love that idea as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear a little bit more from Jess as she tells us what the future holds in store for Rize Girl and the girls of the future. So stay tuned. We'll be back.
And we're back with the beautiful, wonderful Jess from Rize Girl. And Jess, Nicole, and I, and all of our listeners are excited to learn what's next for Rize Girl.
Yeah. So Rize Girl launched within the last year. So it's actually been early days from the business side of it. And what I always think about in the first year is like, you're just putting feelers out there and seeing what people need, right? Like what excites these girls. And every time even I do a workshop, there's pieces of it that excite them more than others. And it's all just that continual learning. What I see for the future is just continuing to build different offerings for them, continuing to figure out how to get into spaces where these girls are so that they can start to hear a little bit of this messaging. And I always say, you know, just planting seeds for the next generation. And when they have that planted seed mixed with a lived experience, something will hopefully blossom for them. And just being open and curious about what I also often in my business have to look back and say, what did I need at that age? But when I was in my sort of teenage years, it was the early 2000s. It's a completely different landscape. So I really have to be in tune with what's going on for them right now and be in a state of constant learning. Like I joined TikTok for investigative purposes. I was like, okay, what's going on TikTok? Because my clients live there and they really enjoy it. So I have to be sort of immersed in that space alongside them so that I can see what their needs are and understand their experiences a bit more so that what I offer is really tailored to what they're going through. So the next year is just going to be, you know, continuing with that curious, open lens. And I've been super grateful to have quite a few opportunities this first year. And I'll just keep building off of those. So it's exciting.
Oh my gosh, I just got this vision of Rize Girl retreats or like summer camp.
Oh, that's 100% gonna happen. Like I'm manifesting it. I don't know, maybe next summer, but the retreat thing, because I do love an in-person experience and I love curating experiences that are memorable and so retreats for sure. I love that you said that.
Yes. I'm so on board with supporting that. You let me know when, and I'll make sure it gets shared with the network. Not that I have like this big network, but you know, you never know.
Oh no, totally. And there's got to be like a yoga element to it, meditation, all these things. I love sort of exposing them to tools that have served me sort of later in life, earlier. And yoga and breathwork and all those things are big parts of that.
Yeah. Any listeners, I mean, working with Jess, if you have any summer camps, if you want her to come into your business, your community, your school, just reach out. In fact, Jess, you could share your information to how we can get in touch with you. If anybody wants to work with you, share all that information. Let us know what you're looking for, what support you need. let us know.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Rize Girl Coaching. It's RIZE. And I'm also, you can check out my website, www.rizegirl.co. But I always appreciate the shout out, definitely in that feelers stage. So thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and talking about all of this amazing stuff you're doing. So powerful.
It's so fun being in community with other women. I never leave a conversation like this not feeling energized and just, it's the best. This is why these conversations are so fun. So thank you guys for having me.
Well, if our friends at home could see me, I am always doing some sort of weird dance.
It's awesome.
Getting out the energy. I've transitioned to standing up to record these podcasts, so it gives me more body freedom.
Totally.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting and going in circles.
Yeah, we got to move. You can't be stagnant on these things.
Yes, no. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I really, really enjoyed meeting you and getting to learn a lot more about what you do and what you're offering. And I definitely want to have a conversation with you about developing your Rize Girl to maybe the Rize woman.
Totally. Oh, I love that. Love that. Ooh, okay. Exciting.
Taking notes, and I saw that.
Yeah, I'm having to write this down right now.
I'm in.
But yes, you have 2 people ready to sign up.
Love it.
And I'm sure lots of our listeners will want to do that as well. And from the bottom of our hearts, really, thank you so much, Jess, for having this recognition and for being willing to step up and do the work. And it is hard. It is tough. You know, you see yourself in these little girls and these girls that you're working with, these young women that you're working with, I'm sure. And I can certainly relate. I've said it a gazillion one times. I'm going to say it a gazillion and one. Super, super important. Grateful for you. Nicole, thank you so much for bringing Jess into the fold. Yes. We're really happy to have you here. And I hope that you come back and tell us what else you're up to in the future. And listeners, we're going to see you next time real soon on Elevated Feminine, where we continue to have real conversation with real women.
Thanks, everyone.